Chapter 4, Mystery. It seemed to Wally as though Jake and Eddie just couldn't help themselves. They were going to go on fighting and teasing forever, no matter how much fun the Hapfords and the Malloys might be having together, no matter how little time there was left. Jake and Eddie had to go on competing, tricking, scheming, until it would be almost impossible to stay friends. Polite as they all had been, up to the bug episode anyway, Jake and Eddie had argued about the best place to lay the blanket. Eddie had said they were too close to the river, and Jake had said they weren't close enough. They'd argue about who had eaten most of the grapes and who had pitched the most home runs on the ball team. You know what we ought to do? We ought to take them to the top of Nob Hill and leave them, said Josh, putting Wally's feelings into words. Going to Nob Hill and the old Indian burial ground was delayed, however, because both the girls and the boys knew that their parents would never allow them to go out at midnight, not even if they left Peter behind. In fact, they wouldn't even be allowed to go that far after dark. The neighborhood, yes. The business district, yes. But not out to the country where there weren't even streetlights to help them see where they were going. Besides, Mrs. Hatford had given the boys a job before she had gone to work that morning. Mrs. Malloy needs all the boxes she can get for packing. I think it would be a very neighborly thing for you to go around to some of the stores downtown and see if they have any empties. I can get big boxes from the hardware store, but I'm sure the Malloys could use some smaller sizes too. It wasn't a job that appealed to Wally, but their mother had a way of making them feel guilty about saying no. Besides, the guy at the drugstore sometimes gave them jelly beans, so Wally went into the living room where Peter was putting a puzzle together on the coffee table. You want to go look for empty boxes? Wally asked. What do I get if I do? Asked Peter. Jelly beans, maybe, said Wally. What do I get if I don't? A kick in the pants, Wally joked. Oh, all right, said Peter, but it's hot out there. Well, Jake's going to his baseball game and Josh is going to the library to help paint a mural. I can't go anywhere if you don't come too, said Wally, knowing that the boys were never under any circumstances to leave Peter at home by himself. Mrs. Hatford worked 6 days a week at the hardware store, and Mr. Hatford delivered the mail, so if neither of Wally's brothers was going to be around, that left him in charge. They went down the sidewalk toward the business district, Peter lagging a foot or two behind Wally. The sidewalk feels hot even with sneakers on, Peter complained. Try walking 1 inch above the sidewalk, Wally teased. Huh? Or you could spit on your feet. That'll keep them cool, Wally said, grinning. And then when Peter got ready to try it, he said, wait, hey, Peter, no. They stopped at Oldacre's bookstore first, and it was like heaven to step inside the air-conditioned room. How you doing? Called Mike, the owner. Any empty boxes? We're collecting them for the Malloys. They're going back to Ohio. So I heard, said Mike. I got some early calendars in this morning. You'll find the boxes in the back. Thanks, said Wally. He and Peter walked down the rows of mysteries and science fiction novels and through the cafe at the back until they came to the stock room. 3 empty boxes sat just inside the door. Wally picked up 2. Peter got the other, and they carried them back outside. At the drugstore, Mr. Larkin told them they could have the boxes that some chocolate syrup had come in. He winked at Wally. And how would you guys like a handful of jelly beans? I wouldn't mind, said Peter. Wally was never sure about those jelly beans, though, because Mr. Larkin never took them out of the jelly bean jar. He would open a drawer beside the cash register and take the jelly beans from there. Were those the ones that had fallen on the floor, maybe? Thanks, Wally said, as he dumped a fistful into the 2 outstretched hands. A yellow jelly bean in Wally's hand had dark marks on one side. Had somebody kicked it with a shoe, he wondered? A red jelly bean looked faded. Had someone sucked on it for a second or two and then spit it out? Peter put all the jelly beans in his mouth at once, but Wally ate them one by one, exploring them a bit with his tongue. With 2 more boxes added to their load, Wally gave Peter the smallest, and he carried the rest. Ethel's bakery was next. I flattened all my boxes yesterday, Ethel told them, but I can give you one that my flour came in this morning. Peter put it on his head upside down. There was just enough flour in it to give his hair a fine white coating so that he looked like a little old man. We've got enough, Wally said. We'll tell Josh and Jake to get the rest. Let's go home. It's certainly going to be different around here with the Malloys gone, said Mrs. Hatford that evening. Maybe, said her husband, but with the Bensons coming back, things won't be any quieter, that's for sure. 5 boys in place of 3 girls can never be quieter. I just wish I'd been a better neighbor, said Wally's mother. It couldn't have been easy for Jean to move down here with her family for a year, not knowing a living soul and having to fit in with the faculty wives and do all the university stuff. We should have had them for dinner more often. We had them for Thanksgiving, remember? Besides, you work full time, Ellen. Jean Malloy didn't expect you to do more. It just would have been nice if I could have been more helpful. I think I'll have them over for brunch right after the van leaves on moving day. I'll tell them to stop by here for a bite before they go. They'll surely appreciate that. I know they will, said her husband. Jake managed to find a couple of boxes at a filling station, and Josh got one from next door. After dinner, Mrs. Hatford said, "You boys take these boxes on over to Mrs. Malloy and ask if there's anything else we can do. I'll call her myself and invite her for brunch on moving day." All the boxes had been piled on the front porch, and after dinner, the four boys set to separating them into four piles, one for each of them to carry. Some had grit on the bottom and had to be turned over and tapped. Some had bunches of rolled up paper or store receipts. While he was stacking the pile of boxes he would carry and shook out some dust, a small piece of paper fluttered out too. It was just a shopping list, and he had started to throw it out when something caught his eye. He read it again. Eggs, rope, tomato sauce, flashlight, dynamite. "Hey," he said. "What?" "Dynamite." "Huh? Dynamite. Where would you go to buy dynamite?" "Where you'd go to buy rope and a flashlight." I guess. Doesn't that sound sort of suspicious to you? Rope, flashlight, dynamite. I don't know. Eggs and tomato sauce don't sound too dangerous. Maybe this isn't a list of stuff to get from a store. Maybe it's a list of things from several stores. The boys looked at each other. What did someone want with rope and a flashlight and dynamite? Wally took the note back and stuffed it in his pocket. He wasn't letting go of this. Wally didn't sleep very well that night. Maybe he should walk that piece of paper down to the police station and turn it over to a sergeant on duty, he thought. Nah, it was too ridiculous. But as the night went on, Wally worried. What if he didn't turn in the paper over to the police and there was a big explosion? What if then he rushed it down to the police station and the officer said, "Why, anybody knows this is the handwriting of Mad Bomber Bill, Wally. If we had seen this list in time, we could have checked his house over, looked in his garage to see if he had any explosives. And maybe Mad Bomber Bill had a little nephew who always followed him around, and on that particular day, Mad Bomber Bill told the little boy to stay home. Go on back to your mother and quit following me around," Mad Bomber Bill might have said. But maybe the little boy was too fond of his uncle and only pretended he was going home. Maybe he turned around and kept following his uncle, hiding behind trees all the way. And maybe Mad Bomber Bill went into somebody's house to place the dynamite, and when he came back out to light the fuse, the little boy ran inside to see what his uncle had put in there. There was no secret. And then maybe the fuse started to burn, and as they got closer and closer to the dynamite, Mad Bomber Bill saw his little nephew playing around inside the house, and maybe he called, "No, come out, come out." But maybe it was too late, and the little boy stumbled, and the dynamite went off, and "No," yelled Wally, and his eyes popped open. There was complete silence in the house, and his room was dark. Suddenly, he heard a door open at the end of the hall, and after a few minutes later, his mom came in. "Wally, was that you?" "Was who me?" With his heart pounding. "I just heard someone yell, and it sounded like you." It was Bill," Wally said. "Who?" "A dream," said Wally. "Are you okay?" "Maybe." "Then go back to sleep," she told him. "Okay," said Wally. But he heard the grandfather clock in the hall downstairs chime out 1, then 2, then 3 o'clock before he finally fell back asleep. Chapter 5, Dare. "I don't know why you told the Haffords that we'll go to Nob Hill some night at midnight," Beth said. "You know Mom will never let us." "Yeah, but the Haffords won't be able to go either, so it will make it sound as though they're the ones who chicken out. I just like to keep them on the hot seat. Didn't you see how suspicious they were acting at Smuggler's Cove, like I was going to pull something on them? It drives them nuts when they're polite. Now we can sit back and see what they come up with." "It looks like they're going on a safari," Caroline said, glancing out the kitchen window. Beth and Eddie turned to look, and coming up the hill from the river were the four boys, each carrying a load of boxes on his head. Mrs. Malloy came to the room. "What in the world?" she said. "Empty boxes for Mom," said Wally. "She thought maybe you could use them for packing." "Oh, how thoughtful of her. Of course we can use them." Moving always takes more boxes than you think. Just stack them there in the front hallway, would you, boys? The Haffords walked through the kitchen and the dining room and deposited their load in the front hallway while the girls watched. Do you have time to stay for some cookies and iced tea? Was this a serious question? Caroline wondered. Did boys have stomachs? Yes, said Peter, answering for all of them, and they all went back to the kitchen and sat down around the table. Mrs. Malloy put a platter of brownies and sugar cookies on the table with a pitcher and some paper cups. Jake looked slyly around. Question. If somebody told you he was going to buy some rope, a flashlight, and some dynamite, what would you think he was going to buy? Said Eddie. If he needed a flashlight, then he was probably going to be working at night. If he had rope, then he was probably going to lower himself down a cliff or into a hole or something. Or hide the dynamite somewhere, said Caroline. What is this, a game? I don't know, said Jake. Show her the list, Wally. Wally pulled the list from his pocket. Eggs, rope, tomato sauce, flashlight, dynamite, she read aloud. Nothing in code, no map, no X marks the spot. I didn't say it meant anything, Jake said quickly. It just seems sort of unusual, that's all. Wally found it in one of the empty boxes. Of course, said Eddie. If they were connected somehow, the rope, the flashlight, and the dynamite, we're probably the first ones to find out. So if anything happens, we're just going to sit around and wait until it happens? Asked Josh. So what do you suggest? Said Beth, taking it to the police and telling them we found a suspicious shopping list? Just keeping our eyes open. That's all, said Jake. If somebody was going to blow up something and somebody was going to lower himself down into a hole somewhere, where would that somewhere be? It could be anywhere at all, said Josh, reaching for a cookie. Somebody's basement, the riverbank, the old coal mine. Caroline's mind was already alive with possibilities. What an exciting movie that would make, a story, a play. What if she were being lowered on a rope into a gravel pit, a mine? What if she had to blow up a dam to prevent the enemy from taking over the town? Maybe her job would be to stop an explosion to reach the fuse in time. Her pulse began a race. As she counted down to herself, Eddie snapped her fingers. Hey, Caroline, get a grip. It could be serious. Yeah, well, if we hear of anything suspicious, we'll let you know. About the coal mine, said Eddie. You and the Benson guys used to go in there, right? Well, not exactly, because it's been fenced in. There's just the tunnel into the mountain. So you've only been over the fence? Not exactly, said Jake. You guys haven't ever been near that old coal mine? It's all hot air. It's all talk. We have so been near it, said Jake. I've looked in there 1,000 times. Well, I'm going to go in it, said Eddie. I'm not going to leave Buckman until I've seen inside that old coal mine. Caroline and Beth looked at their sister in horror. Every so often, Eddie did that. She just went out on a limb and said she was going to do things she never could or never should. Is there barbed wire on the top of the fence? Eddie asked. No, but it's a tall fence, 10 feet tall. Is there a guard on duty? No, but the sheriff drives by once in a while. Is there a guard dog inside the fence? Not that I've seen, but then I'm going in. When? Asked Wally. I don't know. I'll have to case the place first. Anybody going in with me? Not me, said Beth. You're nuts, Eddie. Not me, said Caroline. Eddie looked at the Haffords. I'm not going in any coal mine, said Peter. You're really going to get in trouble, Eddie. My dad said never, ever, ever go there. I'm not going either, said Wally. Count me out, said Josh. Eddie looked at Jake, and there was a long pause. Okay, if you find a way in, I'm in. Caroline and Beth exchanged glances. They were not going to move out of Buckman. They were going to be kicked out of Buckman. Caroline was sure. Chapter 6, Shadows. Why didn't you tell her no? Wally asked Jake as they went back across the swinging bridge in the near darkness. You'll only get in trouble, and you know it. And have her call me chicken, said Jake. Relax. There's no way she can get in. The joke's on her. I'll go along like I'm ready to go in, and it'll be up to her to find a way to open the gate, which she won't be able to do. I don't like it, said Josh. Eddie's going to keep pushing the limits until she makes us do something we don't want to. Who says I don't want to? If she finds a way to get in, I'll go too. Wally didn't like this. Why couldn't the Malloys go? Just go, now, before anything happened. Don't say anything to Mom, Josh warned Peter as they approached their house. I won't. What do you think I am, a tattletale? As Wally lay in bed that night, he decided he was in the clear. Their parents, hold on just a second. Sorry. Their parents would not let them go out at midnight, so he could stop worrying about the old Indian burial ground. He had told Jake and Eddie he would not go with them inside the coal mine so he wouldn't get in trouble there. They had already been to Smuggler's Cove and nothing much had happened, so he was home free. Let Jake get in trouble. He was just asking for it. Wally began to relax. He didn't have to show up at the Malloys ever again if he didn't want to. He could spend the rest of the summer doing exactly what he wanted, which was, well, nothing. Not exactly nothing, though, because what was nothing to someone else might be something to Wally. For example, he was looking forward to spending one whole day trying to figure out how many different calls a mockingbird could make. He wanted to sit out on the porch and listen when the mockingbird perched on top of the telephone pole and began to sing. Usually the bird repeated each song twice, which would give Wally a chance to write down the call. A robin, cardinal, wren, blue jay. But of course, he didn't recognize all bird calls, so maybe he should take a recorder. Or maybe he would like to go a whole morning with his hand over his right eye and all afternoon with his hand over his left eye just to see which eye was stronger. Or maybe he would climb through the trap door in the attic leading to the widow's walk on the roof and sit up there on the little balcony. There was no end to the things Wally could think of to do on his own. Sometimes he'd just like to get on his bike and ride around town. Or he'd go to the dairy store and ask for a cup of today's flavor without even knowing what it was going to be. Some people would think Wally's life was boring, he knew, but there were so many things going on in his head. It was hot outside, though, even at night. Peter was right. During the day, you couldn't step on the sidewalk barefoot. It was one of the hottest summers the East had ever had, the newspaper said. Over 100 degrees for 5 days in a row, even here in West Virginia. Maybe what Wally ought to do is wait until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon someday and then see if he really could fry an egg on the sidewalk. Finally, hot and sweaty, Wally fell asleep and he woke up even warmer than he had been when he'd gone to bed. He rolled over and sat up waiting to see if he could smell pancakes or anything, but he couldn't. That meant it wasn't Sunday. He had almost lost track of the days. He listened for the clink or clunk of spoons. He didn't hear any, but he did think he heard voices coming from somewhere, so he put on his shirt and shorts and went downstairs. Not again! The Malloys were sitting on the front porch with Peter and a fistful of cookies. Wally's first thought was to ignore them, but he went upstairs instead and stuck his head in the twins' bedroom. They're here again. For a moment, nothing happened. What are you talking about? I just thought you'd want to know the Malloys are sitting out on the front porch feeding Peter chocolate chip cookies. Then he went back downstairs through the hall and into the kitchen, poured himself Captain Crunch cereal and mixed it with Cocoa Puffs. Down the stairs came Jake and Josh. They crept into the kitchen. I'm not going out there, said Josh. Me neither. Peter can sit out there in his Donald Duck pajamas all day if he wants, but we didn't invite them over. The twins had just sat down at the table when they heard the front door open and Peter said, "Come on out of the kitchen. You want some cereal?" Jake was still in his boxer shorts and Josh was in his pajama bottoms. Upsetting the milk carton, Jake leaped from the chair and flew out the back door. "Well," said Eddie, "what have we had here?" "I invited them in for breakfast," Peter told Wally. "It's okay, Peter. We've already had breakfast," said Beth. "Where were Jake and Josh?" "They'll be down in a minute," Wally said. Beth got a sponge from the sink and cleaned up the milk on the table. Then the girls sat down like they owned the place. When Jake and Josh entered the kitchen dressed, they tried to act as though they had just gotten up. "We've decided we want to go to Nob Hill even if we have to go in daylight, so we're ready." "Sure, why not?" Jake said. "I found something really interesting. I went to the internet to look up Nob Hill and found out all sorts of fascinating things about it. Want to hear?" "Sure." "Nob Hill, Buckman, West Virginia," Beth read. "This rounded hill west of the city was once a burial ground for a little-known tribe of North Americans known as the Shawnee. They were both admired and feared by neighboring tribes due to the superstition regarding their shadows. It was said that if on Nob Hill the shadow of any person were to fall in the shadow of another, they would be the next two persons to die. When the tribes fought there, neighboring warriors were reluctant to go up the hill for fear their shadows would touch. For this reason, the Shawnee had full possession of Nob Hill for many years until the tribe mysteriously disappeared. It is generally believed that an epidemic wiped out their short lived tribe, but legend has it that when the chief warrior died, the tribe committed mass suicide by walking across the face of the land and allowing their shadows to commingle. Beth stopped and looked around. Well, what do you think of that? The boys were speechless. They had never bothered to look up Nob Hill on the internet. They hadn't known about the shadows. So, I want to go see this place, said Eddie. Wally glanced at his brothers. It was another hot day, too hot really to go climbing, but that wasn't what he was worried about. As long as the sun was shining, one of their shadows was bound to fall on someone else's. 15 minutes later, they were all walking across the pasture toward the high hill, Peter taking big steps. Everyone seemed to be spreading out, keeping their shadows apart. It took longer than they had thought it would to get to the top of the hill. It grew hotter with every step, and sweat dripped down their faces. So this is it, huh? Where the Shawnee are buried? Doesn't it sort of spook you out that we might be standing on the very grave of one of their warriors? They fanned out some more, studying the ground, stepping on large rocks. Hey, look what I found, Jake knelt down. Caroline hurried over, getting just close enough to see him holding a perfect arrowhead. It was just lying there. You found it just like that? She asked. I kicked it. There's supposed to be a lot up here. Instantly, the girls began kicking at the ground with their toes in their sneakers. Beth even got down on her knees and began digging around the rocks. Eddie seemed especially intent on finding another arrowhead. Jake, Josh, Wally, and Peter worked to stay off each other's shadows. The girls didn't seem that concerned, but Wally didn't believe in taking chances. At last, Eddie said, Hey, Jake, can I see the arrowhead a second? I want to know what to look for. Sure. Eddie turned it over and over in her hand. You're a big fat liar, Jake, she said. What do you mean? That's a real Indian arrowhead and I can prove it. Yeah, but you didn't just find it this morning. It doesn't have a speck of dirt on it, not even dust. It even looks like it's been polished. You brought that along this morning just as a joke. Well, it worked, didn't it? You and Beth down on your hands and knees digging away. But Wally was sitting on a rock reading the folded up paper that Beth had read to him that morning. Somehow, she had dropped it while she was searching the arrowheads. You know what else is fake, he said? The Shawnee Indians. Beth jumped up and tried to grab the paper, but Wally held it away from her. It is not fake, said Beth. I printed it right off the encyclopedia on the computer. Some encyclopedia. It misspelled possession and epidemic. Beth's face began to color. Everyone knew that the one thing Wally Hepper could do well was spell. And the Shawnee Indians, if there were Indians, wouldn't have called it Nob Hill. What kind of an Indian name is that? There was nothing for Beth and Eddie and Caroline to do but laugh. So, okay, we're even. You fell for it, didn't you? The shadows and everything. We had you scared half out of your shorts, Eddie said. That's part of the story Beth submitted to the short story contest at the library. She's good, isn't she? If she wins, she'll get it published in the newspaper. So you just made the whole thing up? Wally asked. Totally. There weren't any Shawnee Indians, asked Peter. Nope. And all that stuff about shadows is nonsense, asked Josh. Completely, said Eddie. We had you guys hornswoggled, but good.